I want to welcome all the people on OPN, all the viewers and chatters, and also any channels that might be mirroring us tonight. We appreciate your guys' support and willingness to help spread the messages that come out on OPN. We're very grateful that you guys are involved with this and this collaborative effort. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome Laurel Green from Occupy Charlotte. Laurel is, we've been batting back and forth for a while, and you guys all know how much I've wanted to have Occupy Charlotte on. So now we're going to get the inside scoop about DNC preparations, and I think you guys are about to be amazed by what is going on in Charlotte. It's fairly a second-tier city. DNC is a big deal. Charlotte is ultra-conservative and right-wing, and the DNC are astonishing even to me. So we're really fortunate to have Laurel here to talk about it. So we got a lot to cover, so we're going to launch right in. Welcome, Laurel. Thank you for coming on to OPN.
Thank you so much for doing this. I
Yep.
really appreciate it. All of us do.
We're glad to have you. And Laurel and I have had a few phone conversations, and as I've relayed to some of you guys, that Occupy Charlotte's down there fighting a good fight, and for the most part, they think they've been doing it alone. So hopefully, this help gets the message out, and we can show up in force for the DNC. So, Laurel, I want to launch right into it, and I think when I look off to the side, it's because I'm looking at my notes, so not being impolite. Why don't you tell us, first of all, a little bit about yourself and how you came to be an activist, and then how you came to be part of Occupy?
Sure. My initial steps into activism were in the area of women's health. And so my first experiences with protest were as the person who was being protested, not as a protester. And that's an experience that has definitely informed my activism for a long time, because it is a weird thing to have people outside picketing and yelling at you and death threats, and it's because I was working in women's health in a women's health clinic, and we did abortion. So that was my first experiences a long time ago. Since then, I've tended to be on the other side of the protest line. I've been involved with reclaiming quite a lot. So when Occupy started, I was actually not out at Occupy Charlotte, from day one. I had two things going on: death of a friend and finishing grad school. And I knew that as soon as I went out there, that was going to be it. I was going to be involved, and that's kind of what happened. So I waited a couple of weeks after the Occupy Charlotte started, a few weeks before I got there. But I showed up, was fascinated. It was lovely, beautiful, wonderful, messy, raw, and I've been active ever since.
Right. And so the original occupation in Charlotte was on the grounds of the old courthouse, is that right? Or the new federal area?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the old courthouse, and the real interesting thing about Charlotte was we didn't actually have any laws on the books that prevented camping in public spaces. So when we hit the ground and started occupying there was no law against it. So people kind of freaked out, especially because they had already begun considering, do we need to make changes for the laws in this town based on the DNC coming here? So that resulted in lots and lots of stuff that ended up with the city council here passing what are called the DNC ordinances, which were the same ordinances that evicted Occupy Charlotte. But boy, they are a lasting gift from our city council, and will definitely have big impact on the DNC. And they've already been sort of pulled out for two trial runs. One was for a protest at Duke Energy during their shareholders meeting. And then the next bigger one was at the Bank of America shareholders meeting. And so it was an interesting trial run for everyone, protesters and local police here. So
well, let's talk about that a little bit. I don't want to get too deep into it yet now, but just the idea of the city council passing local ordinances, because that's a purely arbitrary thing on their part. It's not a public referendum. It's not voted on. They just get up in the morning and say, oh, we decide we don't want to have any camping. Is that pretty much the way it goes?
it's actually a little bit worse than that, because the ordinance empowers the city manager to declare what's called an extraordinary event when all these unusual things kick in. The city manager is not a public official. He's not elected. So it's worse than even the city council, who are elected officials. They've basically empowered this guy to, he can decide when there's going to be an extraordinary event. And so we've, of course, made lots of jokes about the use of the word extraordinary. But that's the major part of the DNC ordinances, is that the city manager can declare an extraordinary event. And when he does, he can, number one, set the perimeter of where that is, and then all these extraordinary enforcements kick into place. I mean, things like you can be arrested for wearing a backpack. I mean, it's bizarre stuff, and it's not in place just for the DNC. It's a permanent gift to the city of Charlotte. So.
Right. So it's not limited to the DNC. It's in place because of it, but it goes forward from beyond that.
Yes.
So, okay, we're going to come back and talk about some of that stuff in detail. Was wondering if you could continue on with a little bit of an overview about Occupy Charlotte. You guys were in the encampment. How long did the encampment last, and when were you guys evicted from the encampment?
The encampment started in October, I believe October 7th. And we were there until we were evicted on January 30th, when lots of other places were evicted as well.
Right, that bloodbath weekend, yeah.
Yes, it was painful. I was one of the people that was arrested, and even though I knew what was going on in cities all around the country, I was still holding out hope, because the thing was so ludicrous. The place where I was arrested, actually most of us were arrested, was in the Occupy Charlotte art studio tent. And my, heart is as an artist. So it was really amazing to me that they were not going to allow us to leave that tent there, and that we were arrested. I mean, we had walked that line where we had sort of complied with all the actual ordinances, but we were arrested anyway.
Right. And did you guys have a post-eviction plan, or did you get evicted and then just try to regroup?
Yeah, mostly we got evicted, and then we tried to figure out what to do next.
Right.
We didn't really have a post-eviction plan.
Okay. Well, give us a little bit of an overview of the size of the Occupy Charlotte group, and kind of what your normal activities are during the run-up to DNC.
Our size really, really fluctuates. In the very beginning of Occupy Charlotte, we were having marches that were, 600-700, which for Charlotte, North Carolina, is huge. Charlotte has no real sort of activist culture, no history. It's a very conservative town, and it's also full of people who are transplants. And of course, banking is huge here. So even a lot of people who would speak with us, as passerbys or privately, that were supportive, they're employed by the banks here. So it was a weird place. Anyway, so we've gone up and down in terms of numbers. And lately, it's really hard. We're a small group, and we have this huge thing coming. The DNC and Occupy Charlotte has been aware. I mean, every single day since day one, the DNC's coming. The DNC's coming. So I've heard people in Occupy Charlotte talk about our role as sort of stewards of this area in advance of the Occupy presence we expect to be here for the DNC. Mm-hmm. So we've been aware of it every single day. And there's because Charlotte is also the corporate headquarters of Bank of America, the corporate headquarters of Duke Energy, because we're like Wall Street South, which is a term that the city of Charlotte used to love to put out there to promote themselves. We're the Wall Street of the South. Since Occupy Wall Street started, they're not using it so much, but we're not letting them forget it. So
right. Good point. And I'm glad you made that point, because people who aren't familiar with Charlotte, the city, I told you that I had lived there for years too. It is the world headquarters of Bank of America. Wells Fargo has a huge presence there.
Yes.
AIG has been there. Duke Energy is there. I mean, it is an extremely corporate town, extremely conservative, zero activist culture. In my experience when I was there. So for a band of you guys to get together and be able to sustain any kind of activism is pretty impressive. So I want to talk a little bit about what the challenges of a smallish Occupy, with the DNC coming. What kind of hurdles are you guys finding as an Occupy group? I know we've talked, and you don't have much of a media presence, so a lot of people don't know what's going on with you. So now's your chance to speak to some of that stuff.
Oh, well, we have an internet and media working group, of which I am a part. I have a lot of years of experience working in technology, so I can bring some of that stuff. But to have the type of internet and media group we really need to have to pull off something like the DNC, man, we just don't have the capacity. So this is the shout out to live streamers and people involved in technology. Boy, we could really use some help on that end. I mean, there's all sorts of places where we really need help, but that's because I work in tech. That's one that is real big to me, that I can see that we really could use some help.
And what's your normal methodologies of communicating with the public? Do you guys do a lot of flyering, stickering? Do you have public outreach? And how is the public responding to your activities?
Well, we have pretty good relationships with the local mainstream media here. It's not great, it's not perfect, but it's also not horrific. So we've got a lot of people who are, I would say it's easier to learn the sort of human side of connecting with journalists than for some people to learn a lot of the sort of tech stuff. So that's been a place where a lot of outreach has happened, is actually through local mainstream media, mm-hmm. Which is far from ideal, but it is what it is.
Right. Well, it's better than nothing. So
yeah.
and is the mainstream media fairly sympathetic to the cause? Do they listen? Do they cover your actions pretty well? Are you getting some exposure from the Observer and the TV stations?
They do, and we've had good luck. I mean, of course, it's the mainstream media, so I don't want to, overplay. It wouldn't be fair to represent them as sympathetic. But it also there's not huge horrible bias. I think the way that I would describe them locally is they're curious, and they know that people locally here are also curious. So, some of it is dependent on those people themselves being curious. A lot of it is just recognizing that there's a lot of interest here. Doesn't mean that interest necessarily translates into people showing up in the streets carrying a sign. But there's a lot of interest in Charlotte from people who are not a part of Occupy but are curious. Mm-hmm. So
this is really good. I mean, we talk all the time about outreach, and those are the people we want to reach to, because there's a third that you're never going to reach and a third that already have their mind made up. So that middle third is the most important. And I will say, for my observation, that there is an opportunity to do that in Charlotte where other social climates may not be that receptive, but they are a curious bunch. And if you can draw them in, then people, I want to go back to my last comment about no activism, but actually in Charlotte there's a very understated activism, because I worked with Meals on Wheels and places like that, and there's a lot of committed people who want to do the right thing. They're just not really, really out front and open and loud about it. So, I mean, I think those people are there if we can help to educate and inform them. I want to talk. Oh, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I just wanted to sort of shout out to one of the things that I have learned since being a part of Occupy Charlotte is that there actually is sort of an ancestry of activism here that just hasn't been active in a long time. There's this wonderful guy who periodically, he just sort of shows up. We never know he's coming. But he will show up and he will speak to us about his experiences marching alongside Dr. King in Charlotte. So we do have this ancestry of activism in Charlotte. It has been a long time since it's manifested. And Occupy, one of the gifts to me of being a part of Occupy is to be able to meet some of those elders in activism that I didn't know about before.
Right. That's a good point. Is the Occupy Charlotte group mostly youthful, or is there a good range of ages, and or does it tend towards a more mature group, or how does that?
No, we've got a pretty good range. I mean, I would say we have a greater percentage of 20-something people, but I mean, that's not me, and we've got a pretty good range.
Okay. I just wanted to let you know that we're being mirrored on Global Revolution, which is the mother of all live stream channels. So it's a good chance for you to get your message out. And before they have to switch programming, I want to go ahead and get you to talk about some of the DNC ordinances in depth, specifically the free speech zones and the authorized parade route and the speech lottery and all that. So let's have it that.
All right. So they instituted a free speech zone lottery to award permits and time speaking at this. They're constructing this speakers platform. The lottery the application just closed yesterday. They had 60 spots, and they were so sure that activists would, be fighting each other to have a space in this spot, that's how they decided to do a lottery. Okay, so out of the 60 spots, they only got 24 applications. It was really clear to, from all the groups that are participating in the planning of the events for the DNC, that, we are not going there. There is also to acknowledge that there's, that implies a bit of privilege. I mean, there are other events going to be scheduled that are permitted. So for people who, for whatever reason, that's their comfort level, that will be happening as well. But I thought it was fascinating that, people just, activists just said, we're not going to play. And people didn't apply to be in the lottery to get, some lottery ticket for free speech.
Right.
So
And I wanted to make the point for the people who don't know it, the 60 spots that were going to be the lottery picks were 60 speakers over the course of the convention week, limited to 60 people that could speak out in a pre-approved area, which I suspect is a fair distance from the convention area.
We don't even know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know.
They haven't disclosed
We
the
don't know where it is.
location, so it'll probably be in Mint Hill or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm glad to hear that people refuse to validate it by non-participation. That makes me happy. So also a little bit about parade routes. My understanding is there's going to be approved parade routes controlled by, of all people, the Charlotte Transportation Division. So what kind of information are you guys getting on that?
We have seen one of the parade routes because there is a group that has, and this was the group I was referring to earlier, that is doing a permitted march. And it took them 8 months of pressure to try and apply for this permit. And it was only at 4 o'clock the day that the city council meeting was scheduled for 6:30, and we had a huge bunch of people there, press and everything, to call them out on the runaround we were getting. We got a call at 4 o'clock. It's like, yeah, okay, we'll give you the permit for the march. It's it's not, of course, a great route. It's also not, as bad as it might have been. So it will go through Uptown. It will pass by some of the important spots that we would have liked to, in an ideal way, would have hit some of them. But it's
again, all those things were arbitrarily decided by the city council, right? Again, no public referendum, no votes.
Well, they did have some citizens forums.
That's where they let you say what you want, so they do what they want to do.
Exactly, and they let you have 3 minutes. And one occupier actually got arrested for going over his 3 minutes by 18 seconds. It was huge drama. And they have since reduced the number of citizens forums and limited the amount of time that you can speak at city council meetings. I mean, it's one of the, I know we're all interested very much so in national politics. One of the things that I think that Occupy Charlotte has done very well is to also engage on the local level. And so we have been showing up. There is not a city council meeting that happens that there are not occupiers there. So we're focusing on both the national and the local level. And boy, it's not. It can be royally boring, and it's really not the sort of, I don't know, the sexy action, but it can be very enlightening.
I can imagine, and I'm glad to hear you speak to the local action, because we talk about that a lot. I have an idea that a lot of this nonsense can happen because it's out of the national limelight. That all the chatters, all the viewers can't believe that the city council can arbitrarily pass free speech suppression laws and enforce them, and arrest somebody who speaks 18 seconds over a limit in a public forum. I mean, arrest them. That's just unbelievable that happens.
The same evening, non-occupiers accidentally went over the 3-minute limit. They weren't arrested. It was thrown out.
Yeah.
Of course.
But still hassling.
Yeah. Very much.
I want to get you to speak a little bit to the relationship of let's talk about wallstreetsouth.org a little bit, or the whatever
Okay.
they're calling themselves this week. So there is a coalition group that has, oh, I don't know, 100 different groups that are coming together, of which Occupy Charlotte is one, in
Yes.
order to do what during the DNC?
The group is March on Wall Street South, the Coalition of March on Wall Street South, and they're a coalition. They're bringing in lots and lots and lots of groups that are coming together as a coalition. Their main focus is on organizing an actual march on Wall Street South. It's happening on Sunday. So it's one of several things that is happening as sort of a kickoff, the weekend prior to the DNC. And so that's their main focus, and they are bringing in tons of different groups are coming together to be a part of this coalition. Occupy Charlotte is as well. There's other occupies who are a part of it. It's like all good things in activism and anything radical, there's going to be some controversy. And so for Occupy Charlotte, this is not an either or choice. We are working to organize Occupy the DNC, very sort of obviously Occupy events, as well as being a part of the Coalition of March on Wall Street South.
Right.
So,
well, it's really good because it's several different entry points, and ultimately everybody wants the same thing. So to be able to do that, and I like the point you make that it's not an either or choice, that you can participate in several simultaneous venues. So I think that's good. And Wall Street South is pretty much an organizing group for the coalition. So their organization and logistics. I think now would be kind of a good time to tell your anecdotal story about the pre-convention people's gathering that was out at the Speedway and now is not out at the Speedway, and kind of what the public discussion around that is.
Yes. So initially, the official DNC host committee announced that they would shorten the Democratic National Convention just a tiny bit, and they would have this giant thing out at Lowe's Motor Speedway, which, if you don't know Charlotte, it's a little bit north of Charlotte. It's where they hold up a whole bunch of like NASCAR stuff, so it's a big venue. And they said that, we're going to have a people's convention out at the Speedway on the weekend before the Democratic National Convention. So our first reaction was, yeah, we don't really need your help to organize a people's convention. Thanks. And
this was the DNC this was a DNC idea, Democratic National Convention.
Okay. The host committee organizing thing that, they decided, just like they were going to provide, free speech zones for us, they're going to, there will be a people's convention. And so the interesting local news is that this week it was announced that they are moving the People's Convention pre-DNC party thingy, whatever it's called these days. They're moving it away from Lowe's Motor Speedway, and they're moving it to Uptown Charlotte, which is really very fabulous news for protesters, because we were not going to go up there to be a part of the People's Convention at Lowe's Motor Speedway, but we'll already be here. So it's been really interesting news. There's also lots of reporting. There was a fascinating article in Bloomberg about the true motivations for them to move this to Uptown Charlotte. Couple of things. One, it appears a lot, of course, to be about money in two ways. The fundraising that is happening by the DNC host committee, apparently they are not anywhere near raising the kind of money that they thought that they were going to raise. And it would take a lot of money to pull this thing off in Lowe's Motor Speedway. So that's one thing. The other interesting thing is there is at least speculation that because they separated this and said, oh, it's not actually a part of the DNC, it's just like the day before, that may mean that they could not use any of the $50 million grant money that they got for security if they were holding this thing up at Lowe's Motor Speedway. So it's speculation, and I'm sure we'll know more about it before the DNC happens, because this is all just coming out this week.
Right.
But
interesting evolution but I'm actually pretty optimistic that the People's Convention, even though it's a contrived thing by the DNC, is happening downtown, because it would seem to me it would be less able to be controlled and contained, and that more people will attend. So I actually think it could be a positive step.
Oh, I totally think it's a positive. I actually think it's a positive for both DNC and protesters. But I think it's a positive for protesters. I mean, there's all sorts of like fabulous events that are organized and being planned right now for what is happening. So yeah, there will be a, dance party in the street, rubbing shoulders with the wine and cheese crowd. So I think that's just awesome.
Yeah, that's good. I always think if we show them how fun it can be, then we'll win some people over,
Absolutely.
Why don't you speak a little bit about the relationships between your local Occupy and local law enforcement agencies, which would be Charlotte Met Police and the Sheriff's Department, because you had some interesting things to share about that.
Yeah, we've had, first of all, I mean, Occupy Charlotte has worked really hard to maintain good relationships with the CMPD, Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department. We've done our part. CMPD also has done a really good job. So the place where we're at right now is the relationship between local police and protesters is actually not bad. It doesn't mean that it can't change, and we're well aware that during the DNC, there's going to be all sorts of law enforcement from all over the place here, and it may not be up to the locals. But it is interesting when I watch, what is happening in lots of places. The police response, while of course I, have my critiques, we don't have cops spraying people with pepper spray here. Cops here are for the most part doing a really good job to try and be respectful. And I am aware that a lot of like the DNC ordinances and enforcing them and evicting us, really this was handed down by the city council. I could tell as I was being arrested by people who are like, I'm old enough to be their mother. This was probably not the first choice of the police officers here. They did things like they asked me what kind of music I liked. They were going to change the radio station for me in the back of the police car. And it was like, okay, sweet. So we've had real good luck. We've worked hard. And we have a decent relationship. So I do want people to know that coming in, that this has not been thus far a really aggressive, sort of hostile relationship between protesters and police. It's actually been, when I compare it to stories that I hear from other occupiers, it's actually been pretty good. So
yeah, I think it's a fair point to make. I mean, we're really quick to chastise when they are out of line, so that occasionally when people are nice, we owe it to recognize that too. Have you guys seen any activity or any presence of the alphabet agencies becoming more obvious? Which I want to say hi to all the alphabet agencies, because I know you're watching. Welcome. We're on your side. You're one of us, and just we're all one here. But let's talk about alphabet agencies a little bit. If they've been around, it's a big deal. You know, of course, the president will be in town, Secret Service, all that
Yeah.
stuff. So what's the vibe around that?
Yeah, they're here. We know it. We see them. There are, I have conversations with people who are not actually a part of Occupy, but know that I am, neighbors, acquaintances. And they're telling me stuff like, oh, I saw 4 Homeland Security trucks, that were, I don't know, it's a block away from my house the other day. So, we're hearing about it. We know they're here. We know that there will be more of them coming. We know that they're staying at Comfort Inn Suites in Concord. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
well, it's
we
good,
expect
good to
it.
be aware.
We hope that they will talk to our local people, our local law enforcement. I hope that they will respect some of the work that has been done to build relationships.
Right. So just a quick geography lesson. I just thought about this. Can you tell us a little bit about where the primary venues for the conventions are going to be that you know of? I'm guessing it'll be around Bank of America Stadium, the convention center, and all that.
Yeah, let's see, there's the Time Warner Convention Center. That is like half a block from the Occupy Charlotte occupation site. So Time Warner Arena is in the very center of Charlotte. That's a big one. That's where a lot of events will be happening, DNC events. And then Obama will be accepting the nomination at the Bank of America Stadium. If you were to walk between those two, from the Time Warner Stadium to the Bank of America Stadium, you would conveniently pass the headquarters of Bank of America, the corporate headquarters, and the corporate headquarters of Duke Energy. So there's a real, where events are going to be happening here in Charlotte, there is a real concentration of 1% power, and it will really be on display.
Right.
It will be an easy walk.
Yeah, that was kind of where I was headed. Is you will see what supports the political parties. Will be inherently obvious, and
Yes.
If you want to go to Charlotte to participate in any of the events, it is really concentrated downtown, and you're talking from one end of the convention activities to another is less than I would say a 10-minute walk. So
Yeah.
lots of opportunities to meet and mingle and be active in the streets. Of course, assuming we're allowed to be there. We were hearing some talk of colored bricks on the pavement. Is that true, or is that just an urban legend?
True.
Oh yeah.
That is absolutely true.
Tell the people about that.
The sidewalk in front of Bank of America, it looks like an ordinary sidewalk. It is brick. If you look down, you might notice that some of the bricks are a slightly different color than the others. What that is that Bank of America owns part of the sidewalk, so it is private property. Now, you might not know that unless you have been a part of Occupy Charlotte and either been arrested or threatened with arrest. And in fact, Walkupy, when they came to Charlotte, they're walk-ins, and we had this big festival thing going on. So our plan was to meet them uptown. They are standing in front of Bank of America on the wrong colored part of the sidewalk, admiring the gorgeous public art that is, on the City of Charlotte's public art walking tour that they promote. Walk-uppiers are standing there looking in the window at these beautiful frescoes, and they wind up being arrested. They had no idea. There's this, the colored brick is what designates how the sidewalk magically becomes private property. So there's all sorts of bizarre little Charlotte things like that, and that is definitely one of them. Yes, there's a colored brick thing that you have to watch out for. One of the things that Occupy Charlotte has done consistently is we do the Occupy Hokey Pokey, where you put 1 foot in, 1 foot out. We sort of cross the line of the colored sidewalk, putting 1 hand in. So, that's just become a little Occupy Charlotte thing, is the Occupy Hokey Pokey.
Right. And I want to make the point to the people, the fresco that you're speaking about is a Ben Long fresco done in the style of Diego Rivera, celebrating workers in industry. So, which is in the lobby of the Bank of America World Headquarters. So a lot of irony there by the bucketfuls. And much like the Diego Rivera fresco at Rockefeller Center when it was done, there's a lot of controversy about that because it does make some subtle statements. But just a little aside, Charlotte's a fun place. Everybody should go. So give us a picture of the overall vibe of community support for Occupy. Is there one? Is it positive? Is it negative?
That's a good question. It's real hard for me to answer because I'm, on that sort of inside, hard to be objective. I would say generally, yes, there is support. It's a very sort of Charlotte kind of support, very sort of Southern, like,
understated and polite.
We might not, yeah, very polite. We'll bring you like maybe coffee and tea and donuts, but we don't know whether or not we'll actually like stand next to you and march with you in the streets or not. But we're curious and we're Southern, so we'll be kind of nice. Again, I think mostly, the greatest response from local community is curiosity. Mm-hmm. There seems to be, there's also this sort of conflict. Local people really are not sure what to think of the DNC, regardless of how they feel about politics. Because this is a huge thing that is impacting the everyday life of people who live here, especially with this stuff like the DNC ordinance. So there's a bit of an almost skeptical kind of vibe in Charlotte about what the DNC is actually going to mean for local people.
Right.
Regardless of, however you feel about the political implications, just the actual physical is a big deal for us.
Right. Well, it will have a big impact on local traffic and movement. And, there's a great concentration of the workforce that's in downtown Charlotte. And so that's going to be kind of difficult for them to navigate. And it made me think about another thing, the transportation center. I read, and you probably will need to correct me on it, but the central transportation center hub for Charlotte City buses and all is adjacent to the convention area, and they're going to close it during the week of the convention, and which means that people who rely on public transportation lose it for a week, essentially, or it becomes very difficult.
Yeah, what they're doing is they're moving it, and it is so directly across the street from the Time Warner Arena that so they're moving it, and they're moving it way the heck outside of. We don't know what the actual perimeter will be yet for the sort of the federal homeland kind of perimeter. We don't know what that is yet, but we know that that the central transportation hub would be in it because it's directly across the street from the arena. So they're moving it way the heck out in the middle of nowhere. And we're hearing things that they're going to be like rerouting buses. So hopefully people who are actually, say, daring enough to actually try and get to work might have some public transportation options. It's really pretty doubtful. They're also closing down. The blue line here is our light rail, and one of its stops is in that main transportation hub, and then there's another one that is clearly too close to, convention activity. So they're going to shut down those particular stops of public transit on the Blue Line because they can't pick up the Blue Line and move it like they can the the transportation center and reroute the buses. So yeah, it's fascinating to watch what is happening here.
Yeah, it has really been an education and really eye-opening, I think. So I want to pull a couple of questions off the chat stream for you. We have one person who asked, what is Anthony Fox's response to Occupy thus far? And maybe tell everybody who Anthony Fox is.
Anthony Fox is our mayor, and he had a very sort of no comment-y kind of response in the beginning. He wasn't quite, you could see that he was sort of weighing the political implications. And then at some point he began to sort of adopt this very lecturing tone with us, which is pretty annoying. The real interesting thing was we saw there's been this huge, budget fight in the city council, and we saw Anthony Fox, Mayor Fox, lecturing the members of the Charlotte City Council in the same sort of condescending, demeaning way that he tends to do to occupiers. That happened last week, or 2 weeks ago. So it's been pretty interesting. Now, Mayor Fox also has not come out and said, get rid of those darn occupiers. So, it could be worse.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Have other organizations in Charlotte been working in conjunction with you guys? Are you getting local support from organizations?
Actually, it's been really good in terms of this political climate. It's not just Occupy. It is all sorts of activist organizations that are springing up, and so we have good relationships with some of the other activist organizations that are really seeing a surge as well. There's, it's Charlotte, it's a small activist crowd. So, sometimes you have to really think about, okay, so whose action is this and who am I here with? And a lot of times we just try and not even answer those questions. Mm-hmm. But for example, Rainforest Action Network, they've been pretty active here, particularly calling out Bank of America on their environmental crap, because Bank of America is the #1 funder of mountaintop removal coal. So Rand's been really active in that. Greenpeace has been really active in bringing attention to Duke Energy. And there's a DNC connection here as well, because Jim Roberts, who is the CEO of Duke Energy, is also playing a very, very large role in the DNC host committee and the organizing of the DNC, specifically making lots of efforts to do fundraising. There's lots of buzz about his political aspirations and perhaps what he would get out of playing this role. So there is real good connection between different activist groups, and we're all aware of the interconnection of all the different issues.
Oh, very good. It's very optimistic. You kind of spoke to something that always interests me, the people pulling the levers of the big machine. So today's DNC, the Duke Energy CEO involved, what's going to happen with him 4 years down the road, the wheel keeps turning,
Oh yeah, a lot of speculation about his political aspirations and what will happen with him.
Are any of the Occupy Charlotte people going to be able to make it to the national gathering this weekend up in Philadelphia?
Yes. Yeah, we have. I'm actually not sure how many. 2 people that I know for sure really well, and there may be more. And the caravan came through Charlotte. It was awesome. I did not have nearly as much time with the folks that are on the caravan as I would have liked, because it was one of those we had this huge budget city council thing, so we had to kind of sort of divide up. And I was on the crowd that went to the city council meeting. But it was wonderful meeting them. At least one of the Occupy Charlotte people joined the caravan, and I saw him today in front of post office in DC. So yeah, we've definitely we had some other people I knew that were planning on going. I think I just heard that they're not going to be able to go. So yeah, we'll have. I'm looking forward to some good report backs from people about what happens at the national gathering. I'm real interested. I wish I could go myself, but it just wasn't going to be at all possible for me.
It would be a sight to see. A lot of people have asked if I could go, and I'm like, I would love to, but I can't make it. We have a question from one of the chatters that wonder how you guys are getting along with the local Democratic Party.
Well, pretty good, I guess. I know that we went to, I'm not sure exactly what the meeting was. I was living in a tent and really tired. But there was some meeting that was of the sort of organized Democratic Party. And we actually went there to speak to them, to encourage them to speak out against at the time proposed DNC ordinances. And it didn't turn out that there was some great press release by local Democrats or anything, but we were people were very supportive as we spoke to them. So
okay.
Yeah, we haven't had a whole lot of contact, I would guess. It'd be what I would say. We did in the beginning, not so much now.
Okay. So one of the production team wants me to ask you about the two awesome pieces of art behind you, the transformation piece and is that a ceramic behind you? Is that a plate? I can't tell.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it uses mirrors. The one with the black heart in the center is a much older piece. And the this one is it's part of this Transformation is Possible series I've been working on, and I've been seeing a lot of this sort of wonderful morphinogenic resonance imagery springing up all at the same time in lots of places where people are looking at butterfly symbolism as this sort of evolution, and people are putting different attaching different words to it, but it was one of the things that really spoke to me. We used bits of that sort of symbolism. I did this sort of a bloody butterfly kind of thing with a sort of a U.S. flag that was used a little bit in the protests at Bank of America, and I suspect we'll use it a little bit more during the DNC.
Yeah, and you kind of just glossed over the fact, but those are your work, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
They are.
And so I want everybody to know, and Laurel and I have talked about this because it's a subject near and dear to my heart. She is an artist. She's a working artist, and she has a deep interest in the intersection of art and activism, like I do. So you're being too humble. You should speak out about your stuff. It's lovely. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something I'm really passionate about. And I think it is an awesome way for us to express ourselves and express dissent is to engage in art making. So
that's a good lesson to learn. I say the movement could use as much art and performance as we can muster up to give it, because it's a good way to engage people. So I want to say, do we have any more questions from the chat stream? And while I'm waiting to see if any pops up, do you have any last words or last thoughts you'd like to share? Any points you'd like to make? Any invitations you'd like to offer?
Oh, well, I definitely, of course, I would love to have as many artists as possible join in and help with some of the planning. And of course, we really need people who also are not as called to the art end of it as I feel called. There's a website that we're just sort of getting live. It's there, it's live. It doesn't have nearly as much content as we hope it will as time goes by, but it's occupythednc.us. And so that's the there's also, of course, occupyclt.net, which is our sort of main Occupy Charlotte website. But the occupythednc.us is one that is going to be very DNC Occupy specific.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it looks like we don't have any more questions coming up, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. And I want to say thank you for your time and your energy and your hard work and your enthusiasm. I want everybody to know, if you remember during the Bank of America protest in Charlotte, OPN was the only channel that had live feed coming out of there, thanks to Nate and Twitter and all that. And so we had a lot of viewers, and we were watching you guys. And I personally was astonished at the size of the turnout and how well that whole day went off. And it speaks really well to you guys and to the community of Charlotte. And it makes me really optimistic about what can be achieved for DNC. So give our best to Occupy Charlotte and let them know they have a lot of support out there. People in the chat and all that, if you could spread the word of this interview, we'd love to get them some exposure. We cannot let this DNC happen quietly. Absolutely, we have to shine the light on it, and this is a good start. Laurel and I and Lorenzo have been batting around trying to get down there and help them do some media stuff, so I hope to be there. I hope it's not 105 degrees when I'm there. That's one of the reasons I left. But
yeah, this weekend. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So keep on fighting the good fight and making noise. And thank you so much for your time and energy. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It's it's hard to be in this conservative kind of town, and so it's people like you that are helping Occupies and people in Occupy Charlotte to feel connected to the larger Occupy movement. So I really appreciate the work you do.
Well, thanks a lot. So if you'll stay on for a minute, I'm going to click.